I thought it was fine. I didn't think it was that bad.
How?
I said that mostly because you said that that's what I would say, but
Oh, okay.
okay.
What were your honest thoughts?
No. Here are my honest thoughts. I thought the show got a lot better by the final couple episodes. I thought like it took a long time for me to. Well, I never felt through. I assume they lose a lot of people in the first like 3 or 4 episodes, which is obviously a big deal, and that's bad because I never felt hooked enough that I wanted to open it up and watch the next one. The main thing that made me want to watch it was actually just how pretty and cool it was. And had I not gone to Brandon's private theater and decided to watch the what I think it was like the 7th episode, whenever things actually start to get kind of interesting, I don't know when I would have finished it because I did not feel like there was much driving me forward. That being said, I felt like it did as the kind of mundane plot threads start to like intermingle and things start happening and it feels like the stakes start taking place. I thought that was pretty good, and I enjoyed it. I agree that what is the term that all the critics keep using? Surprise box or whatever?
Mystery box.
Mystery box. I agree that was a kind of lame way to approach the season. But my take there is I think a lot of shows have, not all, there's a lot of really great season ones, but I think a lot of shows, especially ones that intend on telling a story over many different seasons, have like a slow or rough first season. And now that we are out of like the mystery box territory, I have more faith that season 2 will be interesting and compelling. But yeah, they did not do a really good job of like, I think because Lord of the Rings exists and you already know what's happening, it is like the mystery box thing just kind of gets like ruined and was kind of a waste for the first season because you're like, well, that's probably Gandalf. And like the only question or suspense is like, are they going to try to bait us and it's not Gandalf? No, it's
and
Gandalf.
Then they're like, follow your nose. And you're like,
yes. Yeah, exactly. And so I thought that was fine. I was like never, because I was avoiding a lot of the theorizing and stuff like that, I don't think I ever went so far into the like, oh, that guy's Sauron, he's probably Sauron. Like I thought maybe there's a chance, but I was not like, I think as clued in on it, or rather as like certain of it as everybody else was. But I do think that like they flipped that switch really quickly. Like the fact that he's like says something, Galadriel overhears it, Celebrimbor like talk about it, and then is immediately like, wait, he might not actually be the king. I was like, okay, I mean, for something you teased for so many days, like that happened very quickly.
I mean, so here's what I'll say is like on the visual front, no complaints for me. It's obviously a very good looking show. I would say on most technical aspects, they've thrown enough money at the problems that they're not that bad, or like they're not bad at all. Really, my only complaint would be like sometimes the music is just like a little, like I don't know how to put it. It's like trying so hard to be what it thinks it should be. Like this is the emotional music and this is the epic music, and they're like, Galadriel's riding a horse in really slow-mo.
No, but the funny thing is that stuff is in, like, I don't know the last time you watched the Lord of the Rings movies, but there's some like kind of, what's that?
Every year. There's some horrible
like fucking Arwen on her horse. Like, I almost thought that was more of an homage to some of the more cringy cinematic moments.
No, I mean, the thing about the problem with critiquing Lord of the Rings visuals from 25 years ago is that they were cutting edge at the time in almost every single thing they were doing.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, I mean, obviously they're cutting edge again these days. But yeah, I mean, I don't really have any complaints about the visuals or the sound design. It's more like nitpicks that I don't think are fair. The big problem for me is just the writing. Like, I just think it's actually pretty abysmal. And I never ended up making a video, but I did a lot of research on like who the showrunners are and like how they got the job. And like the mystery box thing is so funny. There's been talks about how Amazon as a studio is very metric driven and like want to chase certain things, and like the mystery box an online chatter is one of those things. So who is Gandalf, who is Sauron are things like conversations they want to start, and you can feel like things are constructed to chase that as a metric versus like what naturally arises in the story that they're trying to tell. And these guys came from fucking J.J. Abrams, Bad Robot. They never made a movie or show before this. None of their things, like, they kind of been optioned before, but none of them had actually been made. And like these guys kind of got the job because J.J. Abrams helped like put in a good word and stuff like that. And it's like some of the lessons that you learn that these guys are taking. I mean, like, oh God, it is like, it's sad a little bit. They're like, oh, well, what we learned was like the small scenes early on in the series should probably still tie into the bigger picture because it's early in the series and people care about like narrative momentum. And it's like, Jesus fucking Christ. The scene in the first episode where Nori and the hobbits, I'm not going to call them Harfoots, they're just hobbits. The Harfoots hobbits hybrid go and pick some berries and like they show a random wolf, like ominous. I'm like, and it never ties into anything ever. I'm like, oh, what is this? The Harfoot plotline is entirely useless. It doesn't tie into anything else, and it only functions one to put hobbits in the story, so viewers go, "Ooh, hobbits," and two to be a red herring to Gandalf / Sauron.
So I was thinking about that because I remember you talking. I remember you talking about that with somebody. You made the joke around me, like, "Oh, what did you think of the Harfoots?" And then you said, like, "Oh yeah, they were useless or whatever." So whenever the show ended, I was thinking a little bit about it. I thought, like, the thing is, if you want to have a Gandalf subplot, I think it's really difficult to just follow Gandalf because he's such a like important character and he's so powerful and stuff like that like if you don't want to roll him out in all his glory in the very first season, which maybe you could argue that they should have, but I feel like that you're like the first season felt like it was like setting the pieces and the table stakes essentially. So I think it's really hard to give him like so much agency in the first season.
Well, it's not about that. It's about the fact that plot line literally never interacted in any other plot line, nor was mentioned, nor had any crossover to any other plot line. And like this show was both bloated and had not enough going on. The Harfoot plot line is like such a mess. You can listen to Brandon Sanderson talk about how like they've tonally fucked it up by being like the Harfoots are just bloodthirsty and will like leave anyone who falls behind while also pretending that they're really like family oriented.
Yeah, that was definitely strange. I agree with that because I was thinking about that at the end because they're like they give the big speech about how like we're always together, and then like I'm like, wait, 3 episodes ago you guys were like, acknowledging the fact that the group needed to abandon you if you couldn't keep up.
Yeah, and it's so dumb. Everything about that's dumb. They go over the same lesson like 6 times in a row where it's like, maybe Gandalf is bad. Oh, his magic kind of helped, but kind of hurt. And they hit the same plot beat like over the entire season because they had literally nothing for them to do except be a red herring. There was no like movement there except like, am I good or not? I don't know, but it doesn't tie into anything else going on. And they had to drop plot lines so early on in this series where you just literally don't see characters for extended portions of time in this like full POVs where they just drop the dwarf plot line because it's like there's both too much other stuff to cover, but not enough to justify being in every episode.
I was kind of okay. I'm kind of okay with that because they had so many plot lines where like I don't.
But that's my point. Is like they had too much, so they had to drop plot lines to like put in little bits. But then also like those little bits, like it's just like don't forget Gandalf is still here, and we still don't know if he's good or bad yet. And he did some magic that scared Nori again. Woo, you know, and
yeah, I guess you could make the argument like maybe you introduced Gandalf in the second season, but I do appreciate that you get to see him land and like try to kind of collect himself as a character because he is like an angel, and so having that stuff is
that as like a character development for him is like a little weird, and like he learned to speak oddly quickly and stuff, and like
that is very true. Yes, they shake him around a little bit, and then he's suddenly like, oh, I've now become the most eloquent person in the room. I kind of wrote that off as like they were like, oh, we need to like lift the veil that's been put over his eyes, and so I assume that like the magic kind of got him back into it.
I didn't have that much of a problem with that. I think like that whole plot should have been in season 2, condensed down so it's not so obnoxious, and then like have it tie in some way to the broader plot, which is like the forging of the rings, which is like what we all wanted to watch, and like. Moving on from the Harfoot thing, like the actual ending was so rushed and then it's just like, have you considered an alloy master Elvin Smith and like all this shit? I'm like, I can't. I like the writing was just so dumb that like you're really gonna go to Celebrimbor, like one of the most, and they establish in the story, like this is not like me lore nerding out, that he's like this master legendary elven fucking smith. And they're like, did you know that alloys can be used to enhance the properties of some of the metals? And it's like, yes, that is basic metallurgy. Like this is what Sauron taught them.
Yeah, but
Like
Mithril's supposed to be like a spiritual like thing. I don't think his first impression was like, maybe I can add nickel to this and it'll be good.
yeah, but it's still dumb that like this fucking guy just
I don't know.
walks up and-
That to me feels a little nitpicky. But
All right.
here's one thing that you're hinting on that I like. My major complaint with so many fucking shows, including Arcane, by the way, and I think I talked about this in Arcane thing, and you've heard me talk about this before, is that shows went from having 24 episodes to having like 12 episodes, and then they went down to like 7 or 8 or maybe 9.
Yeah.
And what has happened, I have seen consistently in so many fucking shows, season ones especially, is that when you have 8 or 9 or 7 or 8 or 9 episodes, you spend like the writers take so long in the first 60 to 70% of the season, and then everything gets rushed in the final 30%. And I see this so many times, and I feel like that same thing happened here. And I don't know if it's just because writers haven't adapted yet to the idea that like you have to get moving a lot faster if you want to end it in time, but like this stuff feels like it happens a lot lately.
Yeah. The other thing I'll say, and this is like not just Rings of Power, but almost all sci-fi fantasy shows that are adapting, like are covering like epic scope, is they just do not give a single flying fuck about internal consistency. And it is what set Game of Thrones so far apart in the early seasons for like people like me, was like, things took time. You could not just fast travel. You didn't just like characters just didn't instantly know information that they had no way of learning. Like the fucking Numenorians riding across the sea, landing in the south, charging their horses on open ground until they find some random village that, one, they don't know that there's an ongoing attack. They don't know where it is. They have literally no reason to be there except the show wants to do Helm's Deep-ish kind of scene where the horses charge in and save the day. But like internally, within the confines of the story, this makes no sense. And almost every single sci-fi fantasy show out there gets this wrong. And just like
it's because they're all trying to do the whole thing in 8 episodes. Like,
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say I've seen this in I won't say all of them because I don't want spoilers, but like what happens so many times in the final 2 to 3 episodes is people just start teleporting because they run out of room. And it's like when you get to the end of a page in a spiral notebook and you have to start like writing along the edge up to the top, of the thing. That's what I feel like these final episodes often end up feeling like, because you're right. Like there's not consistency because they don't have space anymore. And they're like, well, shit, what do we do?
And I think like, just like, oh, Halbrand gets shot and then they just like ride on horseback for 6 days to get back to Linden. Like everything breaks down internally. And I think for me, and probably for you, and I think a lot of sci-fi fantasy readers, is what makes these worlds and stories so compelling is that there is this internal consistency. Yes, it's magic. Yes, it's not real. We get that. But like the rules that you set up are then obeyed within your own story. And TV and movie writers cannot do this. It's so rare to find them able to do this unless they're almost like directly adapting the story itself. And it breaks what is one of the best parts of these kinds of stories, is like that I can believe that this is actually happening, because I can't believe this is actually happening anymore. It's too ridiculous. And I really think like a lot of these writers, it feels like, come from like TV and like CSI, where it's like, oh, well, they're just down the street. Like if Jimmy learns new information, he just goes up the block to the police precinct. Not like they're across the fucking continent with no teleportation or flight, and you can't just get over there in a day on a plane. Like I don't know why, but like they completely lack the ability to craft like this immersion that I think is critical for like really getting into and enjoying sci-fi fantasy.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think it's true. And I just wonder how many like of the list of things that you've brought up and that I've talked about, how many of them get solved if they either A, add 2 more episodes, or 2, don't take so fucking long to get the show moving in the first half of the season.
I would agree. Like, especially cutting things. Like, no offense to the daughter of whatever his name is, Elendil. Why did we follow Elendil's daughter's stupid like little bid to like try and be something, and then she has like a weird romance thing, and then like we kind of get some Numenorian plotting setting up for season 2, and like there's just such a waste of time in Numenor with these people who are ultimately not going to matter to anything, and like this is just all over the place in the story where there's just like random bloat, and like Wheel of Time had this with like the random fucking warder who died too, like they need to focus a lot more on like the core story beats and like hammering those out to your point to get the story going, or just give more space to these side characters. One, don't get in the way of the main story, but also then can hopefully like do something on their own, because like there's so many of these like scenes where you're just like, what was the point of that again?
Yeah.
Like, why did we need to watch Nori eat berry? Like that dude could have been your show open. Like Gandalf fucking crash landing and like that fire scene was so cool. And it's like the end for the episode 1 hook. I get it, but like, holy shit. Like I didn't need 40 minutes of dumbass hobbits like that I don't care about until that happens. Like give me the thing that I care about that makes me care about the hobbits, and then give me their characterization, or do the characterization during that. Don't give me 40 minutes of characterization in episode 1 to then lead up to the moment that's cool.
Yep. But I mean, how many shows I feel like if you look at this template of shows having 8 or 9 episodes and then them taking so long in the beginning, you'll see it pop up again and again and again, and it causes so many issues in these shows. And it's my new gripe. And I actually think, I think a lot of it is because they want to spend. It's like companies set aside the budget for these shows. Like I remember hearing a rumor that Arcane was originally supposed to be 10 episodes, and then they made it 9. And I think this happens often, where it's like you get the budget and you're like, it's a 12 episode series, and then you're like, it's a 9 episode series, and I think that it just causes a bunch of issues for these shows. And I think second season will be better. I think the other thing I want to say is I am surprised. Like people wanted to fucking be mad about this show. When I go on YouTube, there's so much vitriol and so much craziness where people almost like gleefully typing out their clickbaits and their headlines and their thumbnails. And I'm like, that is why to me, like the show does not feel that bad, because when I look at it, it feels like people are like treating it as if
it's the worst thing they've ever watched. In their life.
Or like it's like an offense. People get offended by the decision making, and I'm like, just like it's like a 7 out of 10 show, and I think it could become like an 8 or a 9 in the second season because they'll have fixed a bunch of different things. And I'm like, and that's for me, that's fine to watch. And so I guess people just I think I've lowered my expectations for a lot of stuff now, because I do feel like a lot of things have been kind of disappointing over time. And so perhaps that's why when I watch a 7 out of 10 show, I'm not like, how fucking terrible. How would you rate it, by the way?
I would give it a 5 out of 10.
Oh,
I
really?
really
Okay.
care about writing. Yeah, I mean, I would rather watch like a kind of poorly made like budget show that has good writing than like the most expensive show ever with mid writing.
Yeah.
Or outright bad.
There were a lot of.
And that's just.
I think there were too many good standout moments for me to think it was like the surprise with them building Mordor. I thought that was really cool. And so there were enough moments like that made me excited.
I did like that, but then like as soon as I step back and think about like the Rube Goldberg machine kind of set up to make it happen with like a sword that's a key that's like in this random watchtower, or like
the sword thing is weird. I don't really understand that, but I really do like the they do. That is one of the situations where like the mystery box I think kind of works. Okay, where if the question is what are these guys doing, why are they building these tunnels, what's happening, it is kind of like a cool reveal.
I did like that. I just wish there would have been like a little bit more setup for like why was this believable? Like how, like did this make sense, or what was, like the plan came together in a kind of cool way, but I just didn't understand like how could this have been the actual setup. But again, that's like a little nitpicky. I thought the whole like burning of the letters to reveal Mordor was super cringe, as opposed to just having him
I
say
should have just
Mordor.
said Mordor. Yeah, I agree with that. With that. But again, these are like, I think that I think what happens oftentimes is people expected this to be like a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10 because they're like, oh, they've got all this great feeling about Lord of the Rings and Amazon spending all this money, and so people get their hopes up. Then I think when it comes out and it's like a 7 out of 10. No offense to you, I apologize, but I think when it comes out and it's like a 6.5 or a 7, then people start to be like, okay, I didn't like these things, and what else is bad? The fucking letters burn from like Southlands to Mordor. How stupid!
It's like the cinema sins thing, where like any single thing you can nitpick is like supposedly the most embarrassing thing ever.
Yes. Then everything starts to become an issue, and again, like the original Lord of the Rings has a lot of weird decisions that get kind of lost because it was the first time somebody saw something as cool as that. But like, if you rewatch it, like there are moments where like fucking Aragorn's just going like this while like Liv Tyler is being like whispering some crazy shit and her face is overlaid and stuff like that. Like there's some
a lot
pretty
of that
like
stuff is also in the extended editions. Like I actually think watching the theatrical ones is a better experience if you're not just like a hardcore Tolkien nerd who wants to watch everything, because there is some really weird shit.
No, my previous partner and I at the end of last year, we were like, let's watch the extended editions. And I remember watching those when I was growing up and really enjoying them. We did not get through half of the second movie because it's so draggy.
Yeah. It drags so much more than the theatrical ones. Anyways, the thing I was going to say about the show, two things. One, I just feel like the writing was actually quite bad. Like It's been a while since I watched it, but there's just so many things. Like she jumps off the boat and it's just like swimming in the middle of the ocean and just like bumps into these shipwrecked people. And then this guy's like, I'm the Southern King. And she's like, you're the Southern King. I didn't do any research. And then like, oops. Then I did do research, even though I did do research previously about, like, it's just like, it felt very, very tough for me to get into and enjoy like cerebrally, which is how I tend to be a pretty active watcher. And the other thing I'll say, and this is maybe a hot take, but like people got really upset about like minorities being in the show, Puerto Rican, elf, black hobbit, like people got really tweaked about like the wokeness, But if you want to know what really made this show bad, it's like kind of the two white dudes who failed upwards into their position of being showrunners for this thing and writers, much more than like if there's one societal problem, it's not the wokeness that made it kind of cringe and bad. It's probably the dudes who never produced a show or movie before, never wrote a script worth actually turning into a product, getting handed the reins to the most expensive show of all time. If there's one societal issue that you think bled into the show, let me tell you, it's the white guys who just ended up at the reins of this, not like Galadriel having her Yas Queen moments or like whatever. I can't remember the Black Hobbit's name, but like I like that dude Sardoc. Like he was good. Like we know what the real problem was here, guys.
That is actually a really, really good way of putting it. I hadn't really thought about that previously, but I didn't know the story behind the. But yeah, I think that's a pretty good answer. I will say my father, who's fairly conservative in contrast to my own opinions, he watched it, liked it, and was like, yeah, a lot of people were talking about all this woke stuff, but I didn't care. So I feel like whatever he,
if he's not offended by it, it probably wasn't that overbearing.
I will say what was funny was when I was like, oh, I want to just look up like thoughts on the last episode, because like it ends and I want it, especially like all the Lord of the Rings scholars that are out there that can do like kind of the deep dives or talk about compare and contrast. That was pretty cool.
Oh no.
When I searched it, there was a Ben Shapiro reacts to the end of Rings of Power. And it was just like the most cursed thing ever. Cause not even like just because it's Ben Shapiro, but just the idea that like where I just was laughing for like 60 seconds where I'm like, this is where we're at now. Ben Shapiro posting his react takes to the finales of Rings of Power. Like, what is this? What is 2022 content meta? It's fucking terrible.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, I didn't like the show. I'm not a Tolkien nerd. I really don't care. I just didn't enjoy it.
PF Wagers in the chat. I did not watch it, but PF Wagers in the chat said, I think he gave a higher rating than Mark and said he would watch season 2. There you go.
Dude, I'm not kidding you. I watch so much fantasy schlock because I watch with Ashley. Bro, fucking Fate the Winx saga, which got 2 seasons on Netflix and canceled, has better writing than this. Like the main villain is actually so compelling in that, and fucking the devil, the bastard son, and the devil himself has like better writing like you can load up legit like any random YA or low budget fantasy show on most of these streaming services and get better writing than this. I can speak from experience because I've watched all of them almost.
Do you have? Will you watch season 2?
Absolutely.
And do you have more faith in it for season 2?
Not really.
See, I think a lot of the issues with this are naturally solved for season 2. Like they're not going to do the mystery box stuff because all the secrets have been revealed. You know, like to its credit,
so they make new ones.
To its credit, it did do a pretty good job of like not doing the Lost thing where like everything remains unsolved at the end of season 1. You know.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's some things I'm still like, so who the fuck were those like wizards who were harassing Gandalf? Like, who the fuck were they? Like, there's some things.
I doubt that's going to be relevant.
Yeah, I assume they're going to go to Rune or wherever they're from, and stuff will happen. But that's not like mystery boxing. That's just like natural questions and not answering everything that needs to get answered. Right. So, yeah. I mean, like, there's a chance. I think like the thing that concerns me is like, I feel like in some sense writing is sometimes the hardest thing to just like make better. I don't know. I'm not behind the scenes on production stuff, but like,
I think. Like, well, so I do think
I'm more optimistic at A Wheel of Time because there's like legitimate big problems. Like COVID hit, that fucking actor quit on them. They had to like change the entire ending. They had to like make this goofy ass finale with like PS2 graphics because like they're over budget because of COVID. Like Wheel of Time had like legitimate big issues that I think impacted my enjoyment beyond maybe some of the writing choices. Whereas like these were exclusively writing choices. It felt like to me.
Do you think the later episodes were better?
Yes and no. I felt like once they started doing plot things, like hooray, but like the complete breakdown of internal logic to make the plot things happen, made me not enjoy the plot things.
Yeah.
And that's like hard to put back into a show. It's like, oh yeah, we weren't really following any internal logic at all, but now we're going to.
This was a better conversation than I thought. I thought it would be between us. Not because I was worried that your seething hatred for the show because you had been so militant about it.
Part of it is just like I want to like, you know how I am. I like ribbing you and like over exaggerating when we're just fucking around. But
yeah, that's fair.